This undictated special podcast is brought to you by Futuregrowth Asset Management, and Wikus Furstenberg is with us on the line from Cape Town. We've got the mini budget just around the corner. Wikus, have you done any work on it yet?
Alec, yeah, well, it's I think it's an ongoing thing. It's not something we focus specifically on as we get closer to the date, in this case the 22nd of October, but yeah, we've been looking at that since last year, and we're clearly concerned about, like I think most in the market, about ongoing fiscal slippage.
The economy has been struggling. We've had the strikes. So this fiscal slippage that you talk about, is that primarily on collections?
Well, there's a bit of revenue underperformance, and obviously, as you know, the monthly data that we get tends to be quite volatile. There's some seasonality in that as well. But clearly, and we all sort of argued that government, even in previous years, were too bullish on the growth outlook, and in particular at the beginning of the year for 2014 as well. So there's an issue there in terms of revenue underperformance. So we sort of built some of that into our numbers. And then I think here and there we sort of hear pressure from certain ministries, maybe defense, police, and all that, for increased spending. And then we're also concerned about the wage bill growth targets, the timing of wage negotiations, in the light of the recent strike action and inflation peak of 6.7%, when was it, 2 months ago, doesn't really help, does it? And then, the other thing, the big thing, it's about that difficult balancing act around the SOEs, particularly Eskom's funding model.
What did you make of the announcement that came out from Cabinet about Eskom this week?
It's a bit confusing because, there's two parts, right? It's the equity injection. The magnitude of that is still undisclosed. And they mentioned something about funding it from getting rid of non-strategic government assets. Now, we sort of looked around and maybe we're missing something, but we can't really see anything that's size and then that can be sort of sold easily. I don't know whether I'm missing something, which obviously means then there's going to be some sort of direct impact on, or potential direct impact on central government finances. They're either going to draw on that contingency reserve of theirs, which is now down to about 3 billion. So that's small. So there's a lot of question marks around that particular issue, the equity injection. I guess we still got time, but still. And then on the debt side, they indicated that Eskom will be raising an additional 50 billion rand, and obviously over the next period until 2018, because the funding gap obviously applies to that period out to 2018. But there's an indirect impact because government it's supported by an explicit government guarantee, and that obviously means that government's contingent liability is going to increase.
It's an interesting situation that we're in, because we've got a government here that wants to grow employment but doesn't realize that every time it grows employment through the public sector, in fact, it's just adding to its costs.
Oh, for sure. And it's almost like there's this stagflationary, jobless growth trap. But at the same time, we have stretched fiscal metrics, and that's almost like caught on the slippery slope. So, in 2008 we had scope, right? Government sort of was like running a very small deficit. Just before that, a small surplus. So they had scope to do something about the expected recession or whatever was on its way because of the 2008 crisis. We're in a very, very different spot at the moment, and that worries me. It's almost like growth gets hurt by cutting back on job growth and or raising in taxes, because at the end of the day, it seems as if government will be forced to raise taxes. Now, we all know about the Davis Tax Commission and what it's been saying, and we, I think, all expect some sort of tax increases in February of next year. And I think that's probably inevitable. Otherwise, we're going to sort of get ourselves back into a corner here.
I was reading a very interesting piece that Azaj Amin put together for his clients after meeting with Treasury on Friday. And one of the things he says that came out of that was that Treasury seems quite comfortable now in raising taxes for the rich. They were talking about a super tax on people who are at the top end of the bracket. What you're saying is there's something's coming in February, but might we even see something on that sector of the population even sooner?
Well, it's possible. I mean, typically we don't see these really big announcements, with the medium-term budget policy statements in October. But I don't think we should be surprised if we see something, because, for the reasons mentioned, that 4% deficit target that we have for the current fiscal year is obviously at risk for all the reasons we mentioned. So, the sooner the better. It's not just high income groups or the super tax, but I guess we should probably also keep in mind that they might sort of look at higher capital gains taxes, dividend taxes, estate duties. There's a mooted carbon tax to be implemented in January, right? 2016. And then, we don't want to talk about that increase, do we? Which is probably only a long-term possibility. I would think, especially if that national health insurance program gets going and needs to be funded. But I don't think they would be prepared or need to go there now for reasons you mentioned.
So
it's easier that way. It's easier that way.
It's almost like this government is now painting itself into a little bit of a corner where taxes have to be increased, when of course higher taxes are not conducive to more economic growth, which of course expands the pie. So if you were sitting in the finance minister's shoes, what would be the choices that you had to make?
Well, I think it's very, very difficult. I mean, if we sort of want to ignore reality, obviously the right thing would be to sort of keep looking for efficiency gains, not just in terms of revenue, because they've been very good at doing that since many years ago. But is to look at the expenditure side as well. I know there's talk of improved processes, cost controls, and accountability at particularly the provincial level. There's talk there. I mean, we haven't seen anything concrete, have we? And that takes a while. Whether the ministry is in a position to cut expenditure, broadly speaking, I don't know about that. Even on the wage bill thing, we've got all these promises and intentions, but at the end of the day, it's also a political game, and I think that's the reality. What's interesting is Judge Dennis Davis sort of mentioned that the optimal tax GDP ratio for South Africa should probably be closer to 30% instead of the long-standing assumption of 25%. Obviously, that leaves the door open for the minister to say, "Listen, well, that's what this commission is saying, and well, let's go that way for now, at least." And it makes it difficult, doesn't it? I mean, it's got implications for growth. It's got implications for the consumer as well.
So the easy targets would be the rich. So we could probably assume politically that would be a nice option as well for those in power. They would be looking at some kind of a super tax, or at least something on the rich. So rich, as you say, capital gains tax, dividends tax, those are likely to come. Perhaps not in the mini budget, but definitely in February.
For sure, and maybe not. Maybe just introduce higher marginal income tax bracket on high income groups. As simple as that. You don't even have to call it the super tax, because effectively that's what it is. I mean, it doesn't sound as aggressive as saying a super tax on the rich. I mean, effectively it is, but even those capital gains taxes, dividend taxes, estate duties. The high income groups will contribute more in terms of those taxes. So all of them together, bits and pieces, may make a difference.
And in the tax to GDP ratio, if Dennis Davis is looking to edge that up or believes it can go from 25 to 30%, that, as you say, opens the door.
It's a suggestion, but that suggestion, it's timely. It helps, it's the right time. That's what we want to hear, because it does make things a little bit easier in terms of doing that.
Highly digestible politically for those who make the rules. Wikus, just to close off with, are you then anticipating that in the mini budget on the 22nd of October we will indeed see tax increases?
If not the 22nd, then certainly February next year.
Wikus Furstenberg is with Futuregrowth, and this undictated special podcast was brought to you by Futuregrowth Asset Management.